So in an earlier tutorial, I showed you how to make a basic Flash preloader. And I also mentioned in that tutorial that that type of preloader is not going to work if you're using any type of components or external classes. And in this tutorial, I'm going to be showing you how you can properly preload your Flash movies if you're using components. So I've renamed that first layer to Actions and locked it. And I'm going to create another layer above that. And I'm just going to call it Component. Okay, so now I'm going to go to frame 3 and insert a keyframe. And here's where I'm actually going to place my component. So I'm just going to come to the Components panel, and you can choose any one of these, but I'm just going to choose a Date Chooser component, which is basically just a date picker. And then in the Actions panel, I'm just going to extend some frames just so that they both end on frame 3. Okay, so the first thing I want to do now is I want to put a stop command on that first keyframe in the Actions layer. So I'm going to come to the Actions panel and just put in a stop. Okay, so now to review, so the first frame of our movie has absolutely nothing on it whatsoever. The second frame of our movie has nothing on it, and the third frame is the frame that actually is holding the component. So when we actually test this movie, and we look in the Bandwidth Profiler, and if you don't know where that is, it's under the View menu under Bandwidth Profiler, we can see that there's 32K of data on that first frame of our movie. And it doesn't really make sense because the first frame of our movie has absolutely nothing on it. And that's because with components or external classes, they're by default set to export all of their code to frame 1 of the movie. And that's what we have to change in order to be able to see our preloader. Because basically, if we had a preloader here on the first frame, it would have to actually load all of this data before we even saw the preloader. So on a slower connection, the user would basically see a blank screen for a long time before they even saw the preloader. So let's go ahead and change that. So there's a couple of things that we need to do. The first is for any components that you're using, you need to come to the library down here so I can see the Date Chooser in the library. We want to right click it and click on Linkage. And then you just want to uncheck this export in first frame. So it's basically telling it, hey, don't put all of that code for this component on that first frame. And when I uncheck that, now if we test the movie, it's still showing the same thing. Now that's because there's a global setting that we need to change inside of Flash to tell it to export classes and code to another frame other than frame 1. So to do that, if we go to the Publish Settings, so if we go to File, Publish Settings, and then on the Flash tab, under the ActionScript 2 pull down, you can see this button Settings on the right. If we click that, we can now tell it which frame to export the classes to. So essentially all of that code to do with the component, which frame we want to export it to. So I'm going to export it to frame 2 and click OK. So now essentially all of the code associated with any of the components in our movie is going to be exported to frame 2. And now if I test the movie now we can see that frame 1 has less than 1K of data on it. I mean, basically there's nothing on it like it should be because it's blank. And now on frame 2, we can see we have that 32K of data, which is essentially all of the code associated with the components. And then on frame 3, we just pretty much just have the artwork of the components there. So now we're set up to actually make a preloader on frame 1 that will be shown instantaneously. So we'll do that next. Okay, so to create a preloader, I'm just going to create a new layer above Actions. I'm going to call it Preloader. And I'm just going to get the rectangle tool, and I'm just going to drag out just a bar like that. I'm going to hit the V key, go to the Move tool, and highlight it, and hit F8 to turn it into a movie clip. And I'm just going to call it Loader. And then we'll also need to give it an instance name of Loader. And we can also quickly center this on the stage. If I highlight it and come to the Align panel with to stage selected, I'm just going to align it vertically and horizontally. So now that it's aligned perfectly in our movie. Now the other thing I want to do is I don't want to see the preloader after the first frame. So I'm going to insert another keyframe here, and then I'm just going to Control or Command X to get rid of it. So now essentially we have our preloader graphic here, and on the second frame of the movie, all that we have is all of that code associated with the components, and then on the third frame of the movie, we actually have our components. So if you were building a bigger application like this with all kinds of components, basically you would think of frame 3 being the first frame of your actual movie. Okay, so now let's set up the preloader. So I'm going to go to the first keyframe in the actions layer again. And we're just going to set up an onEnterFrame event. So I'm going to say this dot onEnterFrame is equal to function. So the first thing we want to do is create a variable which is going to calculate how much of our total movie has been downloaded so far. So I'm going to create a variable called amount, and I'm going to strict data type it to a number, and then set it equal to this dot get bytes loaded, which again is a function or a method which returns how many bytes of our total movie have been loaded so far. And I'm going to divide that by this dot get bytes total, which is another method which returns the total number of bytes in the movie. So if we divide the bytes loaded by the bytes total, it will give us a percentage in decimal form. But we actually want to turn it into a true percentage, and to do that we just want to multiply it by 100. So now that we have this calculation, now all we need to do is to set the X scale of our loader movie clip equal to this amount variable. So I'm going to say loader dot underscore X scale is equal to amount. Okay, so now we have our loader movie clip moving based on the download progress. But now we want to check to see if it's fully downloaded. If it's fully downloaded, then we actually want to go to frame 3 and play the movie. So I'm just going to do a quick check. So I'm going to say if mount is equal to 100, this dot go to and play 3. And now since we've already finished with our preloader, we want to make sure that we get rid of this onEnterFrame so that it's not continuously running unnecessarily. So I'm just going to say delete this dot onEnterFrame and close that now. So essentially when we come into the first frame of the movie, we're going to be constantly checking the download progress. We're going to be updating that loader movie clip and then checking to see if it's fully loaded. Then let's go to and play frame 3. So if we test the movie now, yeah, and there's one thing we need to do is actually put a stop on this third frame so it doesn't keep jumping around. Okay, so there we go. So now we have our component on frame 3, and we can see by the bandwidth profiler that that first frame has pretty much nothing on it other than our loader movie clip, which is just a simple graphic. All of the code is actually on that second frame where we told it to export classes to frame 2. And then the third frame just simply has the graphical representation of our component. But one thing we can do is actually to simulate the download speed. So if we go to View, Download Settings, and let's say I chose 28.8, and then click Simulate Download, we can now see what it would look like for a user on a 28K modem. So we have the load bar immediately showing it's coming across, and once it reaches 100%, we're now there on frame 3 with our component. So this is the basics of doing an advanced preloader if you're going to be using components or external classes in your Flash movie. So I hope you found this helpful.